Not knowing if the AEL was going to be raised or lifted stopped any and all planning. It stopped planning for next year. It stopped being able to target what raises we might be able to offer because we didn't even know if we would be able to call people back to work. Knowing how many teachers would be available for everything from academics to the arts to extracurriculars. There just becomes that mistrust and that hopelessness. And that's disturbing. That's really disturbing. And it's hard as a superintendent to continue to be the cheerleader for public education when we don't know what's next.
As there is a new report out that says Arizona has one of the worst school systems in the country.
Arizona's public schools are facing huge cutbacks if lawmakers don't take action.
Arizona is still dealing with the teacher shortage.
Arizona is the worst in the country for cutting education.
It's no secret Arizona public schools are in a tough spot right now. They're ranked 48th in the nation, are dealing with a teacher retention crisis, and if we don't act, things are going to get much worse. In Arizona, we have a policy known as the aggregate expenditure limit, or AEL. Essentially, it's a spending cap on how much schools are allowed to spend each year based on this weird formula from 1980.
So the aggregate expenditure limit, constitutional provision adopted in 1980 and not modified since. And so the world of education has changed pretty significantly since 1980. And yet the cap on expenditures for public education has only been tweaked slightly. We base our budget on the legislative appropriation. If then, 3 months before the end of the school year, we find that the legislature is not going to actually let us spend the money that they appropriated, that's a problem.
So when looking at the AEL and the fact that we knew we were going to reach that cap and have to do cuts if something wasn't addressed, for us that was $31 million. How do you cut that out of a budget? There is no way, when you're talking about 80% of your budget being salaries, there is no way to address that kind of cut in funding without reducing staffing.
Every year, this is something that is a point of anxiety. That's not a way to do any kind of business, especially something that's involving children. Honestly, playing a game of yo-yo with students and with the people who are in front of those students is just not a good way to do business, a good way for people to go about their daily lives. And honestly, it passed, it was lifted again, thankfully, but we're gonna start this cycle over again in a few months. And what is that saying about the priorities of our state when we continue that game or continue that yo-yo?
And the uncertainty that provides to teachers or other staff members knowing, I don't know if I want to do this every year. I don't know if I want to play this game every year. It's hard. And the anxiety that causes on people that are looking to work in the school system. It's a real thing.
I don't care what profession you're in, what industry you're in, uncertainty creates anxiety. And so that anxiety creates issues for us. If you raise the concern about the AEL, then everybody hears about it. So therefore, someone who's maybe an hourly employee, an at-will employee, will say, I wonder if I'm going to have a job. But we have a shortage of teachers in the state and in the country. It just doesn't make sense. And if it wasn't an antiquated formula, then it'd be a different conversation. And so people don't understand, well, what do you mean it's antiquated? Well, I'll ask you the same question I'd ask anybody else. What was your rent in 79-80? What was the cost of gas in 79-80? What was the cost of food in 79-80? What was the cost of anything in 79-80 versus today? And so you can't even equate the two sets because you're talking about literally 40 years ago.
A good teacher can make a huge impact. But I feel terrible when you think about the grand picture of it all, because they're here and they're working so hard and they love their kids and they love their job, and we pay them a salary that they can barely live off of. And then with the funding, there's always that in the spring, are we going to be able to continue paying them? Really, we have to worry about that in the middle of the year?
I look at the AEL and say, okay, if you knew that your employer's budget could be cut by 17% every year, you've signed a contract, you're supposed to get paid, but at the end of your contract, they're gonna yank 17% out of the budget, which could ultimately impact you getting paid. Why would teachers stay in this career path? Why would new teachers want to enter a career path where their pay is constantly in jeopardy every single year? There's no job stability in that. This has to get fixed, and we have to get it resolved. Every single teacher is impacted, which means our students are impacted, which means our families are impacted. So it's a community impact. It's not just one little section, but it's something that we all have to be concerned about.